A crying dog brought her dying puppies to this vet, and he did the unthinkable. Limping and covered in blood, she dragged herself to his door, carrying more than just pain. Her puppies were barely clinging to life. The vet hadn't practiced in years. Once respected, now forgotten, he lived in silence and regret. But when he looked into her eyes, everything changed. He didn't know it yet, but this wasn't just a medical emergency. It was a warning. The puppies had been poisoned, deliberately. And this dog? She wasn't random. She came to him for a reason. What began as an act of compassion pulls him into a dark web of secrets, betrayal, and a past he tried to bury. As threats close in and old enemies resurface, he realizes this dog holds a clue to something much bigger and much more dangerous. Who tried to kill these puppies? Why was he the one chosen to save them? And what happens when the truth finally comes out? Before we dive in, drop your name or city in the comments. It reminds me that behind every view is a real heartbeat. The pre-dawn silence shattered with a desperate howl that echoed through the empty parking lot of Barrett's veterinary clinic. Dr. Lionel Barrett jolted awake in his small office, where he'd fallen asleep reviewing old medical journals. The sound pierced through years of carefully constructed isolation, striking something deep within him that he thought he'd buried long ago. He pushed back from his desk, his chair scraping against the worn linoleum floor. The morning's first grey light filtered through dusty blinds, casting weak shadows across scattered papers and empty coffee cups. For a moment, he sat perfectly still, hoping the sound had been a dream. Then came another howl, more urgent this time. Lionel ran his weathered hands across his unshaven face, feeling the weight of each of his 58 years. His first instinct was to ignore it. He'd learned the hard way that getting involved only led to heartbreak. The scandal that had destroyed his practice 5 years ago had taught him that much. The howl came again, this time accompanied by a scratching at the clinic's front door. "Go away," he muttered, but his feet were already carrying him toward the entrance. Through the glass door, he could make out a large shape in the dim light. As he drew closer, the shape resolved into a German shepherd, her coat matted and dirty. What caught his attention wasn't her size or her obvious distress, it was what she carried in her mouth. A puppy, limp and barely moving. Lionel's hand hesitated on the door handle. Behind the German shepherd, he could see more small forms huddled in the cold. 4 more puppies, all of them looking as weak as the one in their mother's mouth. The mother's eyes met his, and in that moment, something cracked in Lionel's carefully maintained wall of indifference. They were intelligent eyes, filled with a desperate plea that transcended the barrier between species. She had brought them here deliberately, he realized. Somehow she had known to seek help, and she had chosen his clinic. "Damn it," he whispered, and pulled the door open. The German shepherd didn't rush in. Instead, she waited, watching him with those knowing eyes. Lionel knelt slowly, his knees protesting against the cold concrete. "Okay, girl," he said softly, his voice rough from disuse. "Let's see what we've got here." She approached cautiously, still carrying her precious cargo. The other puppies followed, stumbling on weak legs. Up close, Lionel could see the mother's ribs clearly visible through her fur, and old scars that spoke of abuse. She had been through hell, but here she was, fighting for her babies. With gentle hands that remembered their purpose despite the years of disuse, Lionel reached for the puppy in her mouth. The German shepherd hesitated for just a moment before carefully transferring her baby to his care. The puppy was warm, but terrifyingly still. "Come on," he said, standing slowly. "Let's get inside where it's warm." The mother shepherded her remaining puppies through the door, her movements careful but urgent. Lionel led them to his examination room, flicking on lights that hadn't been used in months. The familiar smell of antiseptic and medical supplies filled his nostrils as he laid the puppy on the examination table. His hands moved automatically, checking vital signs, feeling for temperature and pulse. The puppy's heartbeat was weak but present. The others weren't in much better shape, all showing signs of what looked like poisoning. His mind raced through possibilities, antifreeze, rat poison, toxic plants. The German Shepherd stood vigilant, her eyes never leaving her puppies, but there was something in her posture that spoke of trust. She had chosen him, and now she was placing all her hope in his hands. Lionel felt something stir in his chest, something he'd thought died the day his career had been destroyed. It was purpose, mixed with a fierce determination he hadn't felt since he'd exposed that illegal breeding operation years ago. The same operation that had led to his downfall when his closest friend had betrayed him to protect the criminals. "I won't let them die," he promised the mother, surprising himself with the intensity in his voice. Her ears perked up at his words as if she understood. Maybe she did. Moving with renewed energy, Lionel began gathering supplies. He had maintained his license and kept basic medications in stock, more out of habit than intention. Now, as he prepared to fight for these innocent lives, he silently thanked whatever instinct had made him do so. The German Shepherd settled beside the examination table, her posture alert but calm. She had done her part. She had found help. Now she watched as Lionel Barrett, the veterinarian who had sworn never to practice again, began the fight to save her puppies' lives. Lionel sprang into action, his medical training taking over despite years of disuse. He guided the German Shepherd and her puppies into his main examination room, quickly but carefully lifting each tiny body onto the stainless steel table. His hands moved with remembered precision as he checked their vital signs. "Pulse is weak," he muttered, fingers pressed gently against the first puppy's chest. "Breathing shallow and labored." The mother watched intently, her intelligent eyes never leaving her babies as Lionel worked. Moving from puppy to puppy, a disturbing pattern emerged. Each one displayed identical symptoms: severe lethargy, shallow breathing, and dilated pupils. Their gums showed a telling bluish tint. These weren't the random symptoms of accidental poisoning. This was precise, calculated. "Someone did this to you deliberately," he said softly, his voice tight with anger. The German Shepherd whined softly, as if confirming his suspicion. Lionel rushed to his supply cabinet, gathering activated charcoal, IV fluids, and other emergency supplies. His hands trembled slightly as he prepared the first injection. The symptoms were hauntingly familiar. He'd seen this exact combination before, 5 years ago, during the Lancaster breeding scandal. As he worked to stabilize the puppies, memories flooded back unbidden. The Lancaster family had run one of the largest breeding operations in Tennessee, all while maintaining a pristine public image. But behind the scenes, they'd disposed of imperfect puppies using a specific cocktail of poisons, the same symptoms he was seeing now. He remembered the day he'd discovered their operation, the meticulous records of their disposal methods, the court testimony where he'd laid bare their cruel practices, the betrayal of his closest friend, who'd been on their payroll all along, the systematic destruction of his reputation that followed. 0.02 milliliters, he murmured, carefully measuring the antidote. His hands were steady now, despite the weight of memories pressing down on him. The first puppy stirred slightly as the medication entered its system. A good sign. Moving methodically from one puppy to the next, Lionel set up tiny IV lines, administered medication, and monitored their responses. The mother remained calm but alert, somehow sensing that this strange human was fighting for her baby's lives. As he worked, his mind raced through the implications. The Lancasters had been shut down, but their daughter Leona had always sworn revenge. She'd been particularly vocal about rebuilding the family business. These puppies, their careful poisoning, it couldn't be coincidence. The timing of the dosage suggested the puppies had been poisoned just hours ago. Whoever did this had wanted them to suffer, but also wanted them to live long enough to be found. It was a message, a signature. Lionel checked the first puppy's vital signs again. The heartbeat was stronger now, more regular. The others were also showing small improvements, their breathing becoming less labored. He'd gotten to them in time, but barely. "Your babies are fighters," he told the mother, who thumped her tail once in response. "Just like you." He began documenting everything meticulously: symptoms, treatments, response times. If his suspicions were correct, he'd need evidence. The Lancasters had taught him that much. His previous evidence had been dismissed as circumstantial, his testimony discredited. He wouldn't make the same mistakes again. Looking at the German Shepherd's scarred body and the deliberate poisoning of her puppies, Lionel felt a familiar fire rekindling in his chest. Someone had wanted him to find these dogs. Someone wanted him to recognize their handiwork. After 5 years of hiding from his past, it seemed his past had found him anyway. The mother dog pressed her nose against his hand as he finished treating the last puppy. Her touch was warm, trusting. She'd brought her babies to him for a reason, and he'd honored that trust. Now, watching the puppies begin to show signs of recovery, Lionel knew he couldn't stop here. He pulled out his old camera and began photographing everything: the symptoms, the injection sites, the mother's scars. Each click of the shutter felt like a step back toward the person he used to be, the veterinarian who had once fought against cruelty no matter the personal cost. The sun had fully risen now, streaming through the clinic's windows. The puppies were stable, their tiny chests rising and falling more naturally. But Lionel knew this was just the beginning. Someone had sent him a message written in poison and innocent blood. The question was, what would he do about it? The morning sun cast long shadows across Lionel's clinic as he surveyed his dwindling medical supplies. The German Shepherd and her puppies were stable but fragile, requiring constant monitoring and care. His fingers traced over nearly empty bottles of medication and the last of his IV bags. He hadn't stocked for an emergency like this. He hadn't stocked for any emergencies in years. Lionel ran a hand through his graying hair, acknowledging the inevitable. He'd need to reach out for help. The thought made his stomach clench, but the animal's needs outweighed his desire for isolation. With reluctant fingers, he picked up his dusty phone and dialed the number for Hope Valley Animal Shelter. Hope Valley, this is Brielle speaking. How can I help? This is Dr. Barrett, he said, his voice rough from disuse. Lionel Barrett, I need… Dr. Barrett? The young woman's voice held surprise, but not judgment. The veterinarian from the Lancaster case. Lionel's jaw tightened. I have 5 critical patients needing intensive care. Can you spare any supplies? There was a brief pause. I'll bring what we can. Give me 20 minutes. True to her word, exactly 20 minutes later, a beat-up pickup truck rattled into his parking lot. A petite young woman with curly auburn hair jumped out, already moving to grab boxes from the truck bed. Her green eyes were sharp and assessing as she took in the rundown clinic. I'm Brielle Monahan, she said, hefting a box of supplies. Where do you need these? Lionel blinked at her efficiency, then pointed toward the clinic entrance. Examination room 1. He followed her inside, watching as she took in the scene. The German Shepherd keeping vigilant watch, the 5 tiny puppies hooked up to IV lines, his detailed notes spread across the counter. Her eyes widened at his precise setup and monitoring system. These readings are incredibly detailed, she said, studying his charts. The poison appears to be a specific compound, Lionel finished, checking a puppy's vital signs. You have medical training? Veterinary student, 2 years in. Brielle began unpacking supplies with practiced ease. I've heard about your work. The real story, not the rumors. Lionel's shoulders stiffened. The supplies are appreciated. I can handle things from here. With respect, Dr. Barrett, you've got 5 critical patients plus their mother. Even with your experience, that's a lot for one person. She met his gaze steadily. I'm trained in emergency care. Let me help. Before he could respond, one of the puppies began showing signs of distress. Brielle moved instantly, checking vital signs and adjusting the IV flow with competent hands. Her movements were sure and gentle, and the mother dog showed no signs of anxiety at her presence. Pulse is stabilizing, she reported professionally, but we should increase the fluid rate slightly. Lionel found himself nodding in agreement. Her assessment was spot on. 0.02 milliliters per hour, he instructed, and she made the adjustment perfectly. As they worked side by side monitoring the puppies, Brielle's quiet competence began to chip away at his reflexive coldness. She asked intelligent questions about the symptoms and treatment protocols, showing both knowledge and genuine curiosity. "These aren't random poisonings," she said finally, recording vital signs in his logbook. "The dosage, the timing, it's too precise." "No," Lionel agreed, surprising himself by continuing. "Someone wanted these puppies found, and they wanted me specifically to find them." Brielle's green eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "Like the Lancaster case? The breeding ring you exposed?" "You know about that?" "I did my thesis on ethical breeding practices. Your testimony was crucial evidence, despite how they tried to discredit it." She checked another puppy's temperature. Nobody who actually read the case files believed their version. Something in Lionel's chest loosened slightly at her words. He'd grown so used to judgment and suspicion that her matter-of-fact support caught him off guard. The German Shepherd chose that moment to press her nose against Brielle's hand, tail wagging gently. Lionel hadn't seen the dog show such immediate trust in anyone else. "She likes you," he observed. "She's a good judge of character," Brielle replied, scratching behind the dog's ears. "And she knows we're helping her babies." She turned to face Lionel directly. "Dr. Barrett, something bigger is happening here. These puppies, the specific poison used, it's not random. I want to help figure out what's going on." Lionel studied her determined expression, seeing none of the pity or morbid curiosity he'd come to expect from others. Instead, he saw the same fire for justice that he'd once possessed himself. "It could be dangerous," he warned. "So is letting whoever did this continue hurting innocent animals." Brielle's voice was firm. "I'm staying. You need the help, and these puppies need us both." Looking at the vulnerable puppies and their watchful mother, Lionel knew she was right. Whatever message was being sent, whatever danger might be coming, he couldn't face it alone. And somehow, this passionate young volunteer with her sharp mind and steady hands seemed like exactly the ally he needed. The next few days fell into an exhausting rhythm. Lionel and Brielle worked in shifts, monitoring the puppies' slow recovery while trying to piece together the puzzle of their poisoning. The mother German Shepherd, whom Brielle had started calling Grace, never left her puppies aside, except for quick breaks outside. It was during one of these breaks that Lionel first noticed something odd. A low buzzing sound drew his attention to the window, where a small drone hovered just above the tree line. He watched it for several seconds before it zipped away into the morning mist. "Did you see that?" he asked when Brielle arrived for her shift. "The drone?" She nodded, setting down her backpack. "It's been around the past 2 mornings. I thought maybe it belonged to one of the farmers nearby." Lionel shook his head. "No one around here uses drones." His voice was tight with concern. "And it was watching the clinic." Later that afternoon, while checking on Grace and her puppies, Brielle called Lionel over to the window. "Look at these," she said, pointing to fresh tire tracks in the mud near the kennel area. The tracks were deep and distinctive, nothing like Lionel's old truck or Brielle's pickup. "Someone's been here," Lionel muttered, studying the treaded pattern. "Recently. Those weren't there this morning." Brielle's green eyes narrowed. "Should we call the police? With what evidence?" "Tire tracks and a drone." Lionel ran a hand through his hair. "They wouldn't take it seriously, not coming from me." The real trouble came 3 nights later. Lionel had insisted on taking the night shift, sending an exhausted Brielle home to rest. Just past midnight, a crash from the back of the clinic jolted him awake. Grace's low growl had him on his feet instantly. The beam of his flashlight caught the tail end of someone ducking out through a broken window. Papers were scattered across the floor, drawers left open, and medical supplies knocked over. But nothing appeared to be stolen. "Brielle," he said when she answered his call. "I need you here. Now." She arrived in record time, still in her pajamas with a jacket thrown over top. Together they surveyed the damage, Brielle taking photos while Lionel checked on the agitated puppies. "Look at this," she said suddenly, holding up a piece of paper that had been placed deliberately on his desk. The message, typed in stark black letters, read, "You should have stayed buried." Lionel's hands shook slightly as he took the paper. "They're watching. They know I'm involved now." "This isn't just about sick puppies anymore, is it?" Brielle asked quietly. "No." Lionel sank into his chair, the weight of the past pressing down on him. "Someone wants me to know they're here. They want me afraid." "Are you?" Brielle's question was gentle but direct. Lionel looked at the note again, then at the recovering puppies in their kennels. "Yes," he admitted, "but not for myself. These dogs were sent to me for a reason. Someone knew I wouldn't turn them away, knew I'd try to save them. And now they're threatening you for doing exactly that." Brielle's voice hardened with determination. "We need to figure out who's behind this before they try something worse." Grace padded over and laid her head on Lionel's knee, her brown eyes full of trust. The gesture steadied him, reminded him why he'd become a veterinarian in the first place. "We'll need to take shifts watching the clinic," he said finally, "and set up some security cameras." "Already on it." Brielle pulled several small cameras from her bag. "I bought these yesterday after seeing the drone again. We can have them running within the hour." Lionel studied his young assistant with newfound appreciation. Her foresight and dedication continued to surprise him. As they worked to secure the clinic, boarding up the broken window and installing the cameras, the threat hung heavy in the air. Someone was watching, waiting, using these innocent animals as pawns in what was clearly a very personal vendetta. "You don't have to stay involved," Lionel told Brielle as they finished setting up the last camera. "This could get dangerous." She met his gaze steadily. "I'm already involved, Dr. Barrett, and I'm not going anywhere until we figure out who's trying to hurt these dogs, and you." The conviction in her voice left no room for argument. Looking at the note again, Lionel realized that after years of isolation, he was no longer facing his demons alone. Whatever danger was coming, whatever old enemies were emerging from his past, he had an ally now. He just hoped their combined determination would be enough to protect the innocent lives in their care. The morning after the break-in, Brielle arrived early with 2 cups of steaming coffee. She found Lionel slumped in his chair, dark circles under his eyes from another sleepless night. Grace and her puppies were sleeping peacefully in their kennel, unaware of the tension surrounding them. "You look terrible," Brielle said, handing him a cup. "Did you get any rest at all?" Lionel shook his head, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Too busy watching the security feeds." "And?" She pulled up a chair beside him. "Nothing. Whoever's watching us is being careful." He took a long sip of coffee, wincing at the heat. Brielle studied the sleeping German shepherd through the kennel bars. Something had been nagging at her since the break-in. "Dr. Barrett, don't you think it's strange? The way Grace showed up here, specifically, how she seemed to know exactly where to come." Lionel's tired eyes focused on her. "What are you getting at?" "Well, she's clearly not a stray. Look at her coat, her build. Despite everything, she's well-bred." Brielle stood up and walked over to the kennel. "Someone owned her, trained her. What if we could find out who?" "How?" Lionel asked, but there was a new alertness in his voice. "Let me check her for a microchip. Most breeders chip their dogs these days." Brielle was already pulling on latex gloves. "Grace, come here, girl." The German shepherd lifted her head, watching them carefully before standing and walking over. She'd grown to trust them over the past few days, especially Brielle. "Easy now," Brielle murmured, running her hands along Grace's neck and shoulders. The handheld scanner beeped softly as she moved it across the dog's skin. When she reached the area between the shoulder blades, the device gave a sharp chirp. "Got it." Brielle's triumphant smile faded as she read the information on the small screen. Her hands began to shake slightly. "What is it?" Lionel asked, moving closer. "The registered owner." Brielle swallowed hard. "It's Leona Lancaster." The coffee cup slipped from Lionel's hand, shattering on the floor. Grace jumped at the sound, retreating to her puppies. The name hung in the air like a storm cloud. "Lancaster?" Lionel's voice was barely a whisper. "Are you sure?" Brielle nodded, showing him the screen. "Leona Lancaster. The chip was registered 3 years ago." She watched his face carefully. "That name means something to you, doesn't it?" Lionel sank back into his chair, suddenly looking much older. "Leona Lancaster is Marcus Lancaster's daughter. He paused, struggling with the words. "He was the breeder I helped expose 8 years ago, the one running the illegal operation. The scandal that ended your career," Brielle said softly. It wasn't a question. Marcus Lancaster was breeding dogs in horrible conditions, forcing them to produce litter after litter until they broke down. When they couldn't breed anymore, Lionel's hands clenched into fists. "I gathered evidence for months, testified against him in court. He went to prison, but his family, including his daughter Leona, swore they'd make me pay." Brielle looked back at Grace and her puppies. "And now his daughter is back in the breeding business." "Not just back," Lionel said grimly. "She's continuing what her father started. But she's smarter about it, more careful." He gestured to the German shepherd. "Grace is living proof. A breeding dog who somehow escaped, probably with help from someone on the inside. They poisoned her puppies to silence her." "But she came to you instead," Brielle said. "She remembered you from before, didn't she? When you were investigating Lancaster." Lionel nodded slowly. "I used to sneak food to the dogs when I was gathering evidence. Grace was just a puppy then, but animals remember kindness." He stood up, new purpose in his movements. "This changes everything. We have proof now, proof that Leona Lancaster is behind this. The Lancasters are still powerful," Brielle warned. "Even with Marcus in prison, they have connections, money. That's probably why they've been watching us, trying to scare you off." "I know." Lionel walked over to Grace's kennel, kneeling beside it. The German shepherd pressed her nose through the bars, touching his hand. "But I ran away once before, let them destroy my reputation rather than fight back. I won't do it again, not when these dogs need me." Brielle placed a hand on his shoulder. "Need us," she corrected. "You're not alone this time, Doctor." Barrett. The morning sun streamed through the clinic windows, illuminating the small family of dogs they'd sworn to protect. The truth about Grace's owner had confirmed their worst fears, but it had also given them direction. The Lancaster legacy wasn't just alive, it was actively rebuilding its empire of cruelty. And once again, Lionel Barrett stood between them and their victims. Back at Lionel's small office, Brielle sat cross-legged on the floor, her laptop balanced on her knees. Empty takeout containers littered the desk beside her, evidence of their hours-long investigation into Leona Lancaster's current operations. "Look at this," she said, turning the screen toward Lionel. "Corbin Elite Breeding Services. Their website is impressive." Lionel leaned forward, his breath catching as a familiar face filled the screen. Dr. Miles Corbin smiled confidently at the camera, standing in front of a state-of-the-art veterinary facility. The years had been kind to him. His salt-and-pepper hair and tailored suit projected success and authority. "Miles," Lionel whispered, the name tasting bitter on his tongue. "My old friend." "The one who testified against you?" Brielle asked gently. Lionel nodded, his jaw tight. "He was my partner in developing rehabilitation protocols for abused breeding dogs. When Lancaster's lawyers started making threats, Miles changed his story. Said I'd fabricated evidence, made it all up for attention." Brielle clicked through the website's promotional videos. Gleaming kennels filled with happy, healthy dogs appeared on screen. "These facilities look amazing, but something feels off." "Play that one." Lionel pointed to a video titled, our revolutionary rehabilitation method. The video began with soft music and Dr. Corbin's smooth voice narrating their groundbreaking approach to animal care. As they watched, Lionel's face grew increasingly pale. Every technique, every careful step in the rehabilitation process, they were his methods, exactly as he'd developed them years ago. "That's your work," Brielle said, anger creeping into her voice. "He stole everything." "Not just stole it." Lionel stood up and began pacing. "He's using my methods as cover. Look at the partner organizations listed on their site." Brielle scrolled down, finding a section titled Our Trusted Network. There, among the impressive list of affiliated breeders, was Lancaster Legacy Kennels, owned and operated by Leona Lancaster. "It's all connected," Lionel said, running a hand through his graying hair. "Miles provides the legitimate front, the respected face of modern breeding. Meanwhile, Leona continues her father's operation behind the scenes. They're working together." Brielle closed her laptop with a sharp click. "We need proof, real evidence that links them to what happened to Grace and her puppies." Lionel was already moving, pulling supplies from his cabinets. "Get me those blood samples we took when Grace first arrived, and my camera." For the next hour, they worked methodically. Lionel photographed each puppy's condition, documenting their symptoms and recovery progress. Brielle helped him draw fresh blood samples, carefully labeling each vial. They compiled their treatment notes, tracking the specific poison markers they'd identified. "The blood work shows traces of a specialized compound," Lionel explained, pointing to his findings. "It's expensive, hard to get. The kind of thing only someone with veterinary connections could access." "Like Dr. Corbin," Brielle added. "Exactly." Lionel gathered their documentation into a folder. "And look at these marks on Grace." He showed Brielle detailed photos of small scars on the dog's belly. "These are from excessive breeding, but they've been surgically minimized, hidden. It's sophisticated work, meant to hide the evidence of abuse, making damaged breeding dogs look presentable for inspection." Brielle realized. That's how they've avoided detection. Lionel nodded grimly. "Miles always was brilliant at covering his tracks, but this time we have something he doesn't expect." He walked over to Grace's kennel, where she watched them with intelligent eyes. "We have a witness who found her way to the one person who could recognize what was done to her. And we have proof that links both Corbin and Lancaster to her condition," Brielle added, holding up their carefully assembled evidence folder. "What's our next move?" Lionel stared at the promotional video, still frozen on Brielle's laptop screen, at Miles Corbin's confident smile and the empire he'd built on stolen work and hidden cruelty. "We're going to finish what I started 8 years ago, but this time we'll bring down the entire operation, not just one part of it." Grace stood up in her kennel, pressing against the bars as if sensing their determination. Her puppies, growing stronger each day, tumbled around her feet. They were living proof of both the cruelty they were fighting and the hope they were fighting for. "They won't get away with it this time," Brielle said firmly, standing beside Lionel. "We won't let them." As evening settled over the clinic, Lionel carefully organized the evidence they'd gathered. Each document felt weighted with purpose, a chance to finally set things right. He looked over at Brielle, who was double-checking their digital files on her laptop. "I need you to take these to someone," Lionel said, sliding the folder across his desk. "Margaret Chen at the Tennessee Tribune. She helped me investigate Lancaster the first time." Brielle picked up the folder, holding it close. "You trust her?" "With my life," Lionel nodded. "And right now, I'm trusting you with everything we've uncovered. It's not safe here anymore, not with those threats and the surveillance." "What about you?" Brielle's green eyes narrowed with concern. "Maybe I should stay." Lionel shook his head. "The evidence needs to get out. Margaret will know how to protect it and release it properly." He managed a small smile. "Besides, I need to get this place ready. Once the story breaks, there will be questions. Inspections. I want to show them exactly what proper animal care looks like. For the first time in years, Lionel felt a flutter of hope. He could picture it. His reputation restored, his methods validated, his clinic once again serving its true purpose. The dream he'd thought died with Lancaster's trial seemed suddenly within reach. "I'll come right back after I deliver these," Brielle promised, tucking the folder into her messenger bag. She hesitated at the door. "Be careful, okay?" "Go on," Lionel urged. "The sooner Margaret gets this, the better." After Brielle left, Lionel began organizing the clinic. He checked on Grace and her puppies, now thriving in their clean kennel. Their recovery was his best evidence, living proof of both the cruelty they'd endured and the power of proper care to heal them. The sun had long since set when Lionel heard the first suspicious sound, gravel crunching under heavy boots outside the clinic's back door. His heart jumped. Before he could react, the door burst open with a crash. 3 men in dark clothes rushed in. Lionel barely had time to register their masked faces before the first blow caught him in the temple. He stumbled, trying to reach the phone on his desk. A second hit dropped him to his knees. "Should have stayed quiet, old man," one of them growled. Through blurring vision, Lionel saw them spreading something around the clinic, liquid splashing against walls and floors. The sharp smell of gasoline filled his nostrils. "The dogs," he managed to gasp. "Please, not the dogs." A boot connected with his ribs. Pain exploded through his chest as he fell. The last thing he saw was Grace's terrified eyes in her kennel before darkness claimed him. Heat woke him. Thick smoke burned his lungs as Lionel fought his way back to consciousness. Orange flames were already climbing the clinic's walls, consuming years of medical records and equipment. The crackle of fire mixed with frightened barks from the kennel area. Lionel pushed himself up, head spinning from the blows. Every breath sent stabbing pain through his ribs, but he forced himself to move. The kennel area was already partially blocked by flames, but he could see Grace and her puppies huddled in the back of their cage. "Hold on!" he wheezed, crawling toward them. The smoke was getting thicker, making it hard to see or breathe. The heat was becoming unbearable. Lionel reached the kennel, his fingers fumbling with the latch. Grace pressed against the cage door, whimpering. Finally, the lock gave way. The mother dog immediately grabbed one of her puppies by the scruff of its neck. "Good girl," Lionel gasped, gathering the remaining puppies in his arms. The flames were spreading faster now, cutting off the main exit. Through watering eyes, he spotted the small window in the storage room, their only chance. Every step was agony as Lionel stumbled toward it. Precious lives clutched against his chest. Grace stayed close to his side, her one puppy held carefully in her jaws. The smoke was so thick now he could barely see. They reached the window just as part of the ceiling collapsed behind them. Lionel could feel the heat getting closer, hungry flames devouring everything in their path. With trembling hands, he worked the window latch, praying it would open. The ancient frame resisted, then finally gave way with a screech of rusty hinges. Fresh air rushed in, but with it came the terrifying realization they were trapped between the approaching fire and a too small escape route, with 5 puppies and their mother depending on him for survival. Brielle's hands shook as she gripped the steering wheel, racing back to the clinic. Something didn't feel right. The knot in her stomach had only grown tighter since leaving Lionel alone. As she rounded the final curve in the country road, her heart stopped. An orange glow lit up the night sky, and thick black smoke billowed from the clinic's roof. "No, no, no!" she cried, slamming on the brakes. The car skidded to a halt in the gravel driveway. Heat from the inferno hit her face as she jumped out, phone already in hand to dial 911. Through the flames dancing in the windows, she caught glimpses of movement inside. Without hesitation, Brielle wrapped her scarf around her face and ran toward the building. The front door was hot to the touch, but she shouldered it open, ducking under the smoke that poured out. "Lionel!" she screamed, eyes burning. "Dr. Barrett!" Coughing racked her body as she pushed deeper into the clinic. The familiar reception area was transformed into a hellish landscape of fire and smoke. Ceiling tiles crashed down behind her, blocking her retreat. Through the roar of the flames, she heard barking from the back of the building. Following the sound, Brielle stumbled through the smoke-filled hallway. Her lungs felt like they were being scraped raw with every breath. The heat was unbearable, but she pressed on, staying low where the air was clearer. She found them in the storage room. Lionel was slumped against the wall beneath a small window, 3 puppies clutched to his chest. Grace stood guard beside him, 1 puppy still in her mouth. The 6th puppy was nowhere to be seen. "Brielle!" Lionel wheezed, barely conscious. "The window... stuck." Without wasting time on words, Brielle braced herself against the wall and kicked the window frame with all her strength. It burst outward in a shower of glass and splintered wood. Cool night air rushed in, offering momentary relief. "Come on," she urged, helping Lionel to his feet. He swayed dangerously, and she could see blood matted in his grey hair. Supporting his weight, she helped him maneuver through the window opening. Grace jumped through next, still carrying her puppy. Brielle gathered the remaining 3 puppies, passing them carefully through to Lionel's waiting arms. The smoke was getting thicker, and she could hear more of the building collapsing behind her. Just as Brielle pulled herself through the window, a thunderous crash shook the clinic. She tumbled onto the grass as the storage room ceiling caved in, sending a fountain of sparks into the night sky. The heat was so intense it singed her hair and eyebrows. Lionel had managed to crawl a safe distance away, still protecting the puppies. Grace stayed close to his side, her own puppy now set gently in the grass. In the distance, sirens wailed. "The evidence!" Lionel gasped between coughs. "All my records..." "Safe," Brielle wheezed, her throat raw. "I delivered everything to Margaret Chen before I came back. She has it all, the blood tests, the photos, everything." Relief flooded Lionel's smoke-streaked face. He reached out and squeezed her hand weakly. "Thank you," he whispered. They watched helplessly as flames consumed the clinic. Years of Lionel's life, medical equipment, certificates, photographs, memories, disappeared into the inferno. But as Brielle looked at the 4 precious lives they'd managed to save, she knew the most important things had survived. Emergency vehicles began arriving, their red and blue lights cutting through the smoke. Paramedics rushed to check on Lionel and Brielle while firefighters attacked the blaze. Grace stayed close, watching protectively over her 4 surviving puppies as they received oxygen and care. "You came back," Lionel said softly as paramedics wrapped him in a blanket. His eyes were filled with a mixture of gratitude and wonder. Brielle managed a small smile despite her raw throat. "Of course I did. Partners don't abandon each other." She held his gaze for a moment, both understanding that something had shifted between them. Through smoke and fire, they'd forged a bond stronger than the flames that had tried to destroy them. The clinic might be gone, but the truth they'd fought to protect was already on its way to being revealed. As dawn began to break over the smoldering ruins, Brielle watched Grace tenderly nursing her 4 puppies. They had lost one of the little ones in the chaos, but 4 had survived against impossible odds. Like the puppies, hope had somehow endured through the darkest night, emerging stronger in the light of day. The morning news exploded with headlines that sent shockwaves through the veterinary and breeding communities. Exposed, criminal breeding ring led by industry elite blazed across television screens nationwide. Margaret Chen's devastating exposé hit like a thunderbolt, complete with damning photographs of the poisoned puppies and detailed genetic documentation linking them directly to Leona Lancaster's operation. In her office at the Channel 8 news station, Margaret laid out the evidence with surgical precision. "These blood tests prove deliberate poisoning," she explained, gesturing to charts displayed on the screen behind her. "The genetic markers match Lancaster's breeding line perfectly. This wasn't just animal cruelty. It was attempted murder to cover up illegal practices." Social media erupted as photos of the injured puppies spread like wildfire. Grace's story, The desperate mother who had sought help from a disgraced veterinarian captured hearts across the country. Security camera footage showed mysterious figures leaving threatening messages at Lionel's clinic, and drone surveillance matched the equipment found at Lancaster's facilities. Leona Lancaster's carefully constructed facade crumbled within hours. Police cruisers pulled up to her pristine office building, red and blue lights reflecting off the glass walls. She maintained her icy composure even as officers led her out in handcuffs, but her eyes blazed with fury when reporters thrust microphones toward her face. The investigation expanded rapidly. Search warrants revealed a network of hidden kennels, each one matching the specifications of Lionel's original rehabilitation centers, down to the smallest detail. Computer records showed years of correspondence between Leona and Miles Corbin, plotting their takeover of the industry. Miles Corbin's moment of reckoning came during a televised hearing before the State Veterinary Board. He sat before the panel in an expensive suit, his media-polished smile now strained and hollow. The room fell silent as security footage played on the large screen, showing his late-night visits to Lancaster's illegal facilities. "Dr. Corbin?" The board chairman began. "Can you explain why these kennels use exact copies of Dr. Barrett's patented rehabilitation methods? Methods you testified against 10 years ago?" Miles shifted in his chair, his composure cracking. "Those are industry-standard practices now," he claimed, but his voice wavered. "Industry standard." The chairman's voice was sharp. "These are Dr. Barrett's exact protocols, down to the medication dosages. Protocols you claimed were dangerous and unethical during his trial." The evidence mounted relentlessly. Financial records revealed payments from Miles to Leona, coinciding with each new facility opening. Genetic reports proved the poisoned puppies came from her illegal breeding program. Every document, every photograph, every piece of data tightened the noose. Miles's carefully crafted public image dissolved under the onslaught of truth. His face grew pale as the chairman presented documents showing how he had stolen Lionel's research, rebranded it as his own, and built his empire on stolen work. When questioned about the attack on Lionel's clinic, he finally broke. "Leona said she would handle it," he blurted out, panic replacing his usual smooth confidence. "I never meant for anyone to get hurt. I just wanted to profit from Dr. Barrett's work while destroying his reputation." The chairman finished coldly. The hearing ended with Miles Corbin's immediate suspension from veterinary practice. Camera flashes captured his stunned expression as security escorted him from the building. Outside, protesters held signs demanding justice for the animals and for Dr. Barrett. Television coverage showed Leona Lancaster being processed at the county jail, her designer outfit exchanged for an orange jumpsuit. The charges were extensive: animal cruelty, attempted murder, conspiracy, and racketeering. The evidence Margaret had protected from the fire proved overwhelming. As Miles Corbin's empire collapsed, his business partners and supporters scattered. Share prices in his companies plummeted. Clinical licenses were revoked. The truth Lionel had fought to expose 10 years ago finally came to light, more damaging than anyone had imagined. In the aftermath, reporters dug deeper into the original scandal, re-examining Lionel's whistleblowing with fresh eyes. His warnings about illegal breeding practices and animal abuse were finally vindicated. The same media outlets that had once condemned him now praised his dedication to animal welfare and his courage in standing up to corruption. The story of Grace and her puppies became a symbol of hope and justice. Photos of the recovering puppies, safe and healthy under Lionel's care, offered a heartwarming counterpoint to the dark revelations about Lancaster and Corbin. The mother dog's intelligence and determination in seeking help had exposed a criminal enterprise and brought down two of the industry's most powerful figures. Justice had come full circle, carried by a mother dog's love and the dedication of those who refused to look away from wrongdoing. The truth had survived fire and threats, emerging stronger than the lies that had buried it for so long. The autumn breeze rustled through the new saplings planted around Lionel's rebuilt clinic. 6 months had passed since the fire, and like the fresh growth stretching toward the sky, something new was taking root here. The modest building bore little resemblance to its predecessor. Its walls were bright and welcoming, with large windows that let in streams of natural light. Inside his office, Lionel sat across from Dr. Howard Chen, head of the State Veterinary Association. The older man's expression was earnest as he slid an official-looking document across the desk. "We want you back, Lionel," Dr. Chen said warmly. "Full reinstatement, department head position at the University Teaching Hospital, corner office, research funding, the works. It's the least we can do after everything that happened." Lionel picked up the offer letter, feeling its weight in his hands. 10 years ago, this kind of validation would have meant everything to him. Now, watching Grace, the German shepherd who had started it all, dozing peacefully in the corner of his office, he felt something different. "I appreciate the offer, Howard," Lionel said quietly, placing the letter back on the desk. "But I've found my place here." Dr. Chen's eyebrows rose. "You're sure?" "This is a prestigious position, Lionel. You could influence the next generation of veterinarians, shape policy." "That's exactly what I plan to do," Lionel interrupted gently. "Just not from behind a mahogany desk." As if to emphasize his point, excited voices drifted in from the adjacent room, where Brielle was leading a training session with local high school students interested in veterinary medicine. A clear, passionate voice carried through the walls as she explained proper handling techniques for rescued animals. "We're starting small," Lionel explained, his voice warm with pride. "Teaching shelter. Hands-on experience for kids who want to learn. Brielle's got a gift for it. She sees the same things I did at her age, but she's got twice the courage I had." Grace's ears perked up at the sound of footsteps in the hallway. Moments later, Brielle appeared in the doorway, her face flushed with enthusiasm. 3 teenagers trailed behind her, each carrying notebooks filled with careful observations. "Dr. Barrett, would you mind showing the students how to check for signs of ear infections?" she asked. "They've got great questions about preventive care." Lionel's eyes crinkled with a smile. "Of course." He turned back to Dr. Chen. "This is where I'm needed, Howard. These kids, they're the future of veterinary medicine. They need to learn more than just procedures. They need to understand what it means to stand up for what's right." Dr. Chen nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. He watched as Lionel rose and joined the small group, demonstrating gentle examination techniques, while Grace sat patiently as the teaching model. The dog's trust in Lionel was absolute, her eyes following him with devoted attention. Later that afternoon, Lionel and Brielle stood in the shelter's play yard, watching as the last of Grace's 3 surviving puppies, now healthy, growing dogs, romped with their new family. The young couple had driven from 2 states away after reading about the puppy's story, determined to give one of them a loving home. "That's all of them now," Brielle said softly, leaning against the fence. "Good homes, every single one." Lionel nodded, his throat tight with emotion. The first puppy had gone to a retired police officer who specialized in rehabilitation for former service dogs. The second found a home with a family whose daughter was training to be a veterinary technician. And now the third would live on a sprawling farm with plenty of space to run and play. Grace sat between them, her posture proud as she watched her last puppy leave. The scared, desperate mother who had sought help in the darkness had transformed into a confident, gentle presence. Her coat gleamed with health, and the trust in her eyes spoke of deep healing. She knew exactly what she was doing that morning, Lionel mused, reaching down to scratch behind Grace's ears. "Coming here, choosing us." "Choosing you," Brielle corrected with a smile. She recognized something in you that you'd forgotten was there. The setting sun painted the sky in warm colors as they walked back inside. The shelter area was quiet now, the day's activities concluded. Photos lined the hallway. Success stories of animals they'd helped, young students learning and growing, moments of healing and hope captured in simple frames. "I never thought I'd be teaching," Lionel admitted as they prepared for closing time. After everything that happened, I was so focused on just surviving. But watching you with those kids today..." Brielle paused in her task of organizing training materials. "They listen because they can see how much you care. Not just about the animals, but about doing things the right way. That's something worth passing on." Grace followed them as they made their final rounds, checking on the shelter's current residents. Each kennel was spacious and comfortable, designed with Lionel's years of experience in mind. The animals they housed were all on their way to better lives, some recovering from illness or injury, others waiting for their forever homes. "You know," Brielle said thoughtfully, "when I first heard about you, people said you were bitter, closed off. But that's not what I saw. I saw someone who never stopped caring, even when it hurt." Lionel stopped at the last kennel, where a recently rescued cat purred contentedly. "Maybe I needed reminding of who I really was," he said quietly. "Sometimes it takes someone else's faith to help you find your way back." The evening settled around them as they finished their work. Through the windows, the new saplings cast lengthening shadows on the ground. Grace stretched out on her bed in the office. A permanent place now, a symbol of trust rewarded and love returned. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new animals to heal, new students to teach. But for the first time in 10 years, Lionel felt completely at peace with his path. He had found his redemption not in grand gestures or prestigious positions, but in the quiet work of passing on what he knew to be true: that compassion, courage, and integrity were the heart of healing. If you believe stories can heal, lift, and connect us, this channel is for you. Thanks for being here. Hit subscribe, and I'll meet you again tomorrow with something real.